get some reaction to what's going on. Joining us now from California is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, California Republican Congressman Ed Royce. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us. What's your reaction so far to what we know? We're anticipating a statement in which they say they've basically reached a so-called framework agreement, but now they have to work out the technical details. They have to draft it with the goal of achieving that by the end of June.
Well, my concern in talking to some of the experts who have been following the negotiations is that the way in which they got to this point was basically by allowing Iran so far to win on a number of different fronts. One of those was to have Iran keep the stockpiles rather than turn those stockpiles over to a third country with respect to the enriched uranium they have. And another was not to nail down that issue of whether or not we were going to have inspectors have the right to inspect anytime, anywhere. And a third point would be the Iranian position that they don't want to close Fordo, nor do they want to close Natanz, where they do their research work. So if inspectors, Wolf, are not going to be able to go into military installations and see what is going on, then we face the possibility of a creep out, maybe not a breakout, but a creep out in terms of their gradual ability to develop a more and more massive program. So that's the worry. Are we giving too much because we've never brought the full weight of sanctions down the way we could have? And that's the debate that Congress has right now over this issue.
Because, as you know, some administration officials say, yes, maybe the Iranians are not going to allow the export of their enriched uranium to Russia or some other country, but there are other ways to dilute that enriched uranium. Keep it in Iran, for example, that'll do the same thing. You buy that?
Well, Wolf, to do that, you would have to be able to inspect that on a constant basis. You would have to be able to ascertain that in the future they wouldn't kick inspectors out. Christine made the point about Iran changing its attitude. And yes, Iran feels they're winning in this negotiation based on those tweets, but it hasn't changed the attitude of the Ayatollah, who's the final decision maker, who still, you know, as you and I know, about a week ago, again, led those chants of death to America. So we do have an attitude problem with Iran. 10 years plus of negotiations with the Europeans, and they've been able to incrementally move the ball to the point where now we know they've worked on plutonium, enriched uranium. We need the inspectors to have the ability to go in there and verify. And until that happens, it looks to me like we're being rolled. And I know that that's the view of many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle right now. Let Iran give us the ability to get the IAEA in there, answer the 12 questions they've been asked about their past nuclear program. They've only answered part of one of those questions. And open up to the rest of the world and show us what's actually going on in those military facilities right now.
The Foreign Ministry of Germany, which is, of course, a key player in all of these negotiations, just tweeted that they have reached agreement on key points of a concluding deal. Stand by, they say, for a press conference. Here's a key issue that members of Congress are going to have to decide, as you know, in the coming weeks. Do you go ahead and let this play out until the end of June without voting on resolutions to impose new sanctions against Iran? Do you give the president that opportunity to finish the deal, or do you go ahead in the coming weeks and vote in favor of new sanctions? The president says he would veto those sanctions, presumably. I don't know if you have the two-thirds override to deal with that kind of veto, but what's your thought about sanctions?
Well, as you know, Wolf, I've always run the committee, my committee, in a bipartisan way, and included the Democrats and the Republicans in the consensus or discussions on this. The last time we brought up legislation, the administration was on the other side. Our vote in the committee was unanimous for additional sanctions on Iran, the kind that would really put the pressure on their Ayatollah and give him the choice between economic collapse or compromise on the negotiations. I am going to be in consultation with our members on both sides of the aisle, and certainly with our Senate Democrats and Republicans who are concerned about this issue. As you know, there are about 12 Senate Democrats who share my concern. Certainly we had a majority of the Democrats in the House, And most of the Republicans in the House signed my letter about a week and a half ago that we sent to the President asking that something be done about those 4 issues that I raised earlier with you to ascertain that we really had control over verification of this nuclear weapons program and that we weren't lifting sanctions prematurely, immediately, as the Iranians want us to do, but instead keep the pressure on for a deal that we can actually verify.
All right, we'll see what happens. We're standing by for this news conference. Chairman Ed Royce of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, thanks very much for joining us. I want to